Welcome to the Michigan Minds Podcast, a quick and informative analysis of today's top issues from University of Michigan faculty.
I'm the Richard A. Meisler Collegiate Professor in the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, and I'm jointly appointed in the Departments of Afro-American and African Studies, History, and in the Residential College. And this year, I've also been serving as the chair for the Presidential Debate Academic Advisory Committee that's focused primarily on planning for the Democracy and Debate theme semester for fall 2020. As a scholar, I specialize in American and African American intellectual and political history. And so in my work, I explore the interconnections between race and ideology, especially in the context of social movements in the United States across the 20th century, primarily, on both the left and the right sides of the political spectrum. Right now, I'm working on a book that explores the intersections and interconnections between the post-World War II civil rights movement and the rise of the New Right. And it argues that they're much more entangled than we want to imagine. And so I'm hoping to tell what I'm calling an ideologically wide history of the civil rights and Black Power movements that celebrates the tremendous ideological diversity within African American political culture, sometimes in unexpected and uncomfortable ways, but in ways that I think are important to acknowledge. Right? So it's one thing to say that Black political culture isn't monolithic, but it's a really different thing to try and demonstrate it through a historical study. So as somebody who studies political ideology, this has been, a really rich and just extraordinary moment, I think, for the country overall. So some aspects of the waves of protests sparked in the wake of the murder of George Floyd are unique. The size, the locations, the diversity of some of the protests that we're seeing, but others are really about ideas and actions that have been unfinished or delayed generation after generation. So grappling with police brutality within Black and Brown communities that are underprotected and over-policed is really one of the most pressing of these kinds of trans-historical issues, right? So it's not new to this moment. It has a long history, but it has a history of being just deferred, literally decade after decade, generation after generation. And of course, one can argue, and I argue sometimes in my own work, that the United States has never really reckoned with its racist past and the degree to which forms of white supremacy, racial discrimination pervade our society, shape our laws, determine our health outcomes, our access to education, and the ways that it threatens our democracy. So it's not surprising, too, that some of the protests are, especially in this moment, are starting to focus on monuments and public spaces. That these things would be front and center, because if you think about it, they're really ideology written in stone and cast in bronze, right? And so I think kind of contesting that, it makes a certain amount of sense that that's what we're seeing now in the context of protests that have touched on so many issues, from police brutality to mass incarceration to what's going on in communities across the country. A lot of us, have been working on these planning issues across last semester and over the summer. I think, we kind of agree that democratic cultures and practices, civic engagement, informed debate don't just happen. The democracy is really a muscle. It needs to be exercised. So the Democracy and Debate theme semester, we hope, gives us an institutional framework to think, to teach, to learn together about what it means to be a member of a democratic society, what democratic engagement looks like from a global perspective, especially as authoritarian governments are on the rise, and what makes the exchange of ideas so difficult for us, particularly at moments of such extreme polarization, that we're finding it difficult to agree even on the basic facts. Theme semesters have a long history within LSA. In fact, last academic year, there were 2 theme semesters, one focused on the Great Lakes, and the other, which goes into the fall, technically, is on the anniversary of the 19th Amendment, called Suffrage 2020. So we've had a lot of theme semesters. But an all theme semester is a little unique, a little rare. But it works in a similar fashion, linking designated courses along with a series of events that are all meant to explore a central issue or a question or an idea. So for us, we've taken democracy and debate as a theme that will kind of link together the courses and the events. This theme semester is a little unusual too, not only because it involves the entire university in a way that's not always common in a theme semester, but also because it involves Michigan Online and a Center for Academic Innovations Democracy and Debate Collection, which is a series of digital assets that we're creating now and will be creating in the fall that we hope will be used during the theme semester and then well beyond it. Right. So for other kinds of conversations, not only on campus, but among our alumni community and then out in the surrounding communities that are beyond the campus. I think our goals are to have as many collective explorations of the facets of democracy as possible in ways that highlight multidisciplinary knowledge and insights and research. There are over 100 courses that were selected to be part of the theme semester, and they span the humanities and the arts, the social and natural sciences, as well as engineering, urban planning, law. Some focus on aspects of democracy, voting, shifting definitions of citizenship and inclusion. Others center on major policy issues that'll play a role in the 2020 presidential debates and the elections, such as immigration, climate, healthcare, mass incarceration, and police reform. So that really spans the gamut of the university and pulls on all the strengths and talents, particularly of our faculty. Broad-based engagement with the UM community, including students, faculty, staff, alumni, was an important part of the planning for the theme semester from the beginning. The COVID-19 pandemic makes that more complex and challenging, but our goals still involve community engagement and public outreach. I think people will be excited about some of the programming we've come up with. And of course, we'll be working with Student Life and other campus and community partners around voter registration, especially for students and within the framework of the Big Ten Voting Challenge. For me, the key takeaway is that this is Michigan at its best. This has been a very difficult period for our country and for our world. The pandemic, coupled with what President Schlissel called the pestilence of racism and deep structural inequalities. Michigan at its best means providing a platform and a framework to confront the biggest, most pressing issues that'll make or break our society as we continue to struggle to fulfill the perpetually deferred promise of American democracy for all of its citizens and all of its residents. That's not to say that we have all the answers, we don't. But we know how to pose the questions, organize the data, do the research, teach the courses that are an important part of finding the answers and generating solutions, ideally informed by the protests we've witnessed locally, nationally, and internationally, and inspired by that level and degree and commitment to anti-racist activism in education. Democracy is hard and messy, sometimes ungovernable, even maybe a little frightening, but always worth fighting for. As the great Ella Baker once put it, give light and people will find the way.
Thank you for listening to the Michigan Minds podcast, a production of the University of Michigan. Join the conversation on social media with #UMichImpact.